Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to buy a brand new graphics card in 2025, then guess what? You're in the right place, because throughout this video, we're going to find you the perfect GPU for your next gaming PC build. It is an incredibly exciting purchase and one that should see you through years of PC gaming bliss. But not only is it very daunting at the moment, but we live in very weird times, with price inflation and frankly graphics cards that just aren't worth buying. But fortunately for you, that's where we come in, as we've poured literally hours and days and weeks into testing pretty much everything on the market just to help you to find the perfect graphics card for you, because everyone is going to be different. Not everyone needs to spend a crazy amount of money, and as I say, there's definitely quite a lot of caveats and pitfalls that are very easy to fall into in 2025. So I think without further ado, let's show you how to get the perfect graphics card for you. And it's worth noting that if you do kind of know everything about GPUs, you don't want the full explainer, then you can just skip ahead with our timestamps where we go straight to the recommendations, or just use our affiliate links listed down below. So let's kick things off then with a very simple question. What exactly is a graphics card and what does it do? Well, put simply, it's the gateway to PC gaming. It's an essential component that uses thousands of tiny processors put to work by your game engine that results in a beautifully rendered game world for you to explore. The higher the amount of processing units, the faster they run, and then the quicker the graphics card can process and render frames, which increases the frames per second, or FPS, that you then see and feel on screen. And of course, it should go without saying that the larger and more powerful the graphics card is, the better gaming experience that you should get in-game. But it's worth noting that in a gaming PC, it's not literally just a graphics card. You've also got other things like the CPU, the RAM, and SSD that can have an impact on your FPS and the smoothness of the game. If you want to learn a little bit more about this and essentially just make sure you're having a great all-round system, then check out our guide to PC parts in the top right corner of your screen, where we explain everything in much greater detail. But focusing back in on the graphics card themselves, and they're actually made up of several different components, such as a printed circuit board, PCB, capacitors, memory modules, but the bit that really makes the biggest difference is the GPU itself, which is the graphics processing unit. Now, GPUs are designed by Intel, Nvidia, and AMD, and then they're sold to third-party vendors like PowerColor, MSI, ASUS, and many, many more, who have them assembled and strap on their own unique cooling designs. And this is why you will pretty much always see two brands on the box. So this is a pallet manufactured card, but the GPU inside is from Nvidia. This is a RTX 5090 with an Nvidia GPU, but made by Pallet. Each GPU will of course have a completely different level of performance, but as you add more cores and increase the amount of power that it will use, then the coolers themselves will also need to get bigger to stop them from overheating. This is why cheaper cards are usually much smaller than new flagship ones. Each card will also be fitted with varying amounts of video memory, or VRAM, which traditionally hasn't always been that much of an issue. Essentially, it kind of just like works in the background. It stores things like textures, game settings, and then it's used by the GPU itself, outputs, happy days. But it's one of those things that if you either don't have enough or it's not fast enough, it can actually impact your frame rate considerably. If it works properly, you wouldn't really know too much about it, but if you run out of video memory, you can miss textures, so games can look weird, you can get stutter, or worst of all, the games themselves can frequently crash or just not work in the first place. And unfortunately this year, both Nvidia and AMD have been selling 8GB graphics cards that cost over £300, which just essentially means that it's not very future-proof today. And there are actually certain games, things like Indiana Jones for instance, that just won't run properly with 8GB of VRAM unless you literally turn all of the settings all the way down. Maybe you turn down to lower resolutions like 1080p. And it's really weird to have graphics cards that, relatively speaking, are pretty powerful, but are limited by the VRAM, so you have to turn settings down when they actually have the performance to run the games at higher settings. So do not get caught out, but we'll discuss this when we get to the recommendations. It certainly is a really difficult thing to pin down in a single sentence what's the right amount of VRAM, because multiplayer games use quite a lot less, whereas really heavy ray-traced AAA titles will use considerably more. But generally speaking, unless it is a cheaper card, you want to go for 12GB of VRAM or higher, and certainly 16GB or more if you are playing at 4K. But of course, the absolute best way for you to see, compare, and visualize the performance of all the different graphics cards is to watch videos like this, where we show you some beautiful graphs with average numbers to show smoothness and 1% lows to highlight any issues, but then also our dedicated build videos, where we take each card for a spin and you get to see what those numbers actually look like in the real world. The funny thing is though with GPUs these days is that it's not just about the hardware, it's also about the software features that you get with a graphics card, because obviously on a graph all things being equally, whichever graphics card is fastest would usually be the better, but it's definitely worth considering about the software suite that you're going to get with your chosen brand of graphics card, because they are not all made equally. I'd argue that by far the most useful feature has to be upscaling, a way to massively boost the FPS and smoothness of your game by using a lower resolution and then using AI to restore it, but in a much more computationally cheap way. Now, credit where credit's due, Nvidia does do this the absolute best, with its DLSS 4 super resolution technology that uses AI transformers to have the best looking and probably what will end up to be the most adopted tech, whilst AMD is a close second place with its new FSR 4 technology, though unfortunately this is only available on the latest RX 9000 series of GPUs. And then thirdly, lastly, and bringing up the rear, Intel also has XeSS, which I personally use in Fortnite, and it's absolutely fine. You might have to use it at a slightly higher setting than FSR 4 or DLSS, but it still looks good, and it's actually open source, so you can use this on any of the graphics cards rather than Nvidia where you have to have a Team Green card, or the new FSR 4 that only works, as I say, on 9000 series GPUs. But I can already hear the cries coming through the camera lens of,
why are you promoting DLSS? It's the worst thing ever. Fake frames.
do not get this technology confused with the next thing I want to talk about, frame generation. And you can get it again on Intel, AMD, and Nvidia. It's frankly better on Nvidia, but it's not a technology I personally use all of the time. Actually, I kind of use it a lot less than I do use it. Essentially, the thing you need to take away from this is that super resolution affects the rendering pipeline. So by rendering at a lower resolution, it actually means that your GPU can work faster, it can process more frames per second, the game will get better, the latency goes down. However, with frame generation, what this does is to use AI to actually insert AI-generated frames in between rendered frames. So it works in tandem with super resolution. So you have like your super resolution frame, then a completely AI-generated frame. And you've now got what Nvidia are calling multi-frame generation. We have rendered frame, AI frame, AI frame, AI frame, rendered frame. And the problem with this is it's quite prone to having some weird artifacts. So if I'm moving this way, it's quite obvious to know, okay, the next frame is going to be here. But then when I do that, well, it's probably going to add an extra frame of me going in that way before it realizes that I've changed direction and started moving that way. And obviously this happens a lot in video games, so it's prone to artifacts. But the issue is that it actually increases the latency of the game that you're trying to play. So whilst it will definitely affect the smoothness, and in theory it could turn, say, like 90 FPS into 200 FPS in terms of the way it's presented on screen, the way it looks, as soon as you actually start moving the mouse and keyboard around or use your gamepad, it won't feel as nice as before you actually turn frame generation on. So it depends on the game that you're playing, but in my experience, pretty much every time I've sat down personally to play a game and I've got the option to turn it on, I tend to turn it off because I prefer to have the game not look quite as smooth, but to have it as tight as possible. Now, not everyone is going to prefer that, which is why I think it is a good thing that we have these options. But yes, do not get misled by Nvidia, because there is some pretty horrible marketing out there, I mean, a lot of it, where they're trying to say, oh, look, you turn on DLSS and look, you got 200, 300 FPS. Great, but you're comparing that against no AI generated frames. So what I would like Nvidia to do is just to kind of break it down so you can see DLSS off, DLSS super resolution, frame generation, and then you can see, okay, that's what frame generation does, that's what it adds. But it doesn't seem that they're doing this, which is really, really very frustrating. So please don't buy a graphics card just because in their marketing with DLSS 4 you get 300 FPS, because the latency of that might not actually be very nice. The whole game might feel weird. Please remember this one. It is a big, big deal. Do not get misled. It's also worth noting that ray tracing is still a big phrase on campus, and the situation is actually way better than it was a few years ago when it was first introduced. For instance, more games now actually properly support the tech, and the ones that do use a better implementation, so it's not just like a few weird reflections in Battlefield. Your whole game should look a whole lot better. And personally, I also like that older titles like Returnal and Control can now be played on lower tier graphics cards without the whole thing running like absolute toilets. And on this topic, you've got to remember that the fundamentals of ray tracing are still the same. Nvidia graphics cards are going to be the best for ray tracing performance, and the ray tracing effects themselves are incredibly taxing on your system, and they will lower your frame rate significantly. It's also worth bearing in mind that some games coming out, like Star Wars Outlaws and Indiana Jones, actually require ray tracing capable cards, as they bake RTFX straight into the game. It's also worth bearing bearing in mind that different graphics cards support different creative features too. So for gamers or content creators that do gaming, you might want to capture the gameplay that actually comes out of your GPU, but you don't want the gameplay that you see on the screen to slow down. This is when you use the internal encoder that's actually baked in to all of the graphics cards now that will be sold. But it's worth bearing in mind that NVIDIA and AMD's, you can actually record kind of natively with the driver. You just press a hotkey, bam, it's done. Whereas with the latest generation of Intel Arc cards, you can't do that at the moment. You have to use an external app like OBS, but hopefully that will come in the not too distant future. If you're more of a creative professional, not trying to teach you how to suck eggs here, but NVIDIA cards also support CUDA and ray trace acceleration using optics, which can help to speed workflows when using applications that support them. And there are plenty of use cases where you need a lot of VRAM, so a GPU that is high in VRAM is obviously going to help you out a lot.
Oh, but PC Centric, he's talking about creative applications. I just want to know about frames per second. I want to play Battlefield.
Look, okay, we've got to the point in the video where we can now press on to the best bit, which is the recommendations. And don't forget that if you do want to check out current pricing on anything we're going to be talking about, it'll fluctuate a lot. We'll do our best to leave links to like Newegg, Amazon, everything with our affiliate links listed down below. But without further ado, let's crack on with the recommendations. Now, to kick things off at the budget end, you are looking almost exclusively at Intel for new cards, though they are considerably more expensive than if you were to get something on the used market. If you want to go for the absolute cheapest gaming PC, I'd probably lean towards a used AMD RX 6600 for around about £150, which isn't exactly a bargain compared to what they were last year, frustratingly, but it will get you set up with 1080p gaming in multiplayer titles without much fuss. If you're specifically looking for something new though, but also something on the budget end that does come with a warranty and more up-to-date features, then I would focus you in on the Intel Arc B570 and B580. Cards that pack 10 and 12 gigabytes of VRAM respectively, can actually handle a little bit of light ray tracing in titles that demand it, and have a surprising amount of punch at 1440p, even at higher refresh rates. My advice? Try to buy the B580 if you can, as it's got more VRAM and a fair bit more performance.
Hold up. Editor Carl quickly jumping in here. Since we filmed this video, NVIDIA announced an RTX 5050, which appears to be essentially a 4060, but $50 less, 2 years after the 4060 launched. We're intrigued to see how this card performs, but we're not expecting it to be 70 times faster than a GTX 1050. Just imagine how high the latency is going to be. So if you're interested in seeing how it performs, make sure you get subscribed for the full video.
Stepping it up to the mid-range though, and I'm actually pleased to say that we actually now have a pretty good option with AMD's latest launch, the 9060 XT. But be very careful, do not buy the 8GB version, you need the 16. There's no doubt about it, the performance here is pretty strong, with wins versus the 5060 in a lot of games, and it even gets close to the 5060 Ti in others. If you want to play games confidently at 1440p, even in the latest cutting-edge titles, then this will do nicely. It also works with the brand new FSR4 upscaling tech that honestly looks so much better than FSR3. It's genuinely one of the best improvements I've seen this year. Just as I say, please be sure to ignore the similarly named 8GB version, as while it is cheaper, the performance in the latest games can be far worse, and it will age like the finest milk in the Jersey sun. It's worth noting that this is the exact same reason why we're not actively recommending the RTX 5060. That is also an 8GB card, and even though in terms of value for money on the charts it can actually look pretty enticing, that 8GB of VRAM, it's gonna just about be okay now. We have to turn some settings down in certain games, but the point is, if you're gonna be spending all of this money on a brand new graphics card that is supposed to be able to last you for years to come, we have no confidence that 8GB of VRAM is going to be able to do that. Stepping it up once more though, and if you're after a great card for mid-range gaming but specifically want those NVIDIA features and better ray tracing performance, then you can look at the RTX 5060 Ti 16GB. Once again, ignore the laughable 8GB card. Now, this outperforms the 9060 XT, has faster memory, and fares really well across the board, with access to the excellent DLSS 4 Transformer AI upscaling, and it even gets you the multi-frame generation tech that can, emphasis on the word can, be worth using. And at this point in the video then, it is absolutely time to get
serious.
But I'm afraid I have to break a little bit of bad news. As soon as you get into like 1440p, high refresh rate, kind of like £500, $600 sort of mark, unfortunately the cards here are just a bit meh. I mean, we've got the RTX 5070, which actually performance-wise is pretty good. It obviously has the NVIDIA latest features and things. Performs pretty well on our graphs when we compare it to other GPUs. But this is a 12 gigabyte card. Yes, you heard that right. We go from 16 gigabytes to 12. And the problem is, if you're going to play games like Indiana Jones, it's quite easy to break the RTX 5070 because you've got all these NVIDIA ray tracing features and performance. But as soon as you turn some of them on, it can just cause stuttering and just some really big issues because that VRAM buffer is filling up. That's a bit of a bummer, and we do have a competing AMD card, the RX 9070, not the XT, and in theory, this should actually be a really good recommendation, but it seems that AMD cocked up the pricing with this. It launched at a cheaper price, and now it's got more expensive to the point where it's more expensive than the card it's competing against, which is the RTX 5070. It does get you more VRAM, it's got 16 rather than 12, you've got FSR4, but realistically, I think you kind of want all of the features of the NVIDIA cards with the VRAM of the AMD one, and if you're choosing between the two, it's difficult because at the current time of filming in terms of pricing, I think the 5070 is probably going to be the better bet because it's actually a fair bit cheaper. But if they were at the exact same price, I'd be tempted to go for the AMD one, but it's kind of up to you to use your discretion. What's going to be more useful for you, like the extra VRAM or the extra NVIDIA features? Unfortunately, I kind of hate to say this, but my recommendation would actually be to spend a little bit more money and to get you something that's much better all round, that has better performance and importantly, better longevity. Now, obviously, again, pricing will vary depending on your region, but both the RX 9070 XT and the RTX 5070 Ti are the mid-range champs. AMD, with their improved ray tracing and FSR4 tech, make it highly desirable, with performance that kicks ass at all resolutions and actually undercuts NVIDIA on price. NVIDIA, meanwhile, have what I could only describe as the jack-of-all-trades GPU, with the RTX 5070 Ti having 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which is ideal for all types of gaming, and then enough horsepower to let you run ray-traced titles with the new DLSS transformer tech for both smooth visuals and amazing graphics. Personally, I've got to say, I would genuinely be really happy with either, but if the price difference wasn't that large, I'd go for NVIDIA, but if there was a good gap between the two, it would have to be AMD. Oh, and at this point then, we are left with just two options because both Intel and AMD aren't even competing in this category. We've got the super duper high-end 4K ray tracing cards, and there's pretty much, I was going to say two main options. There are just two options. This one, which is the RTX 5080, or obviously you go all out and you buy the RTX 5090. Now, the 5080 I found to be pretty disappointing at launch because there wasn't a massive difference in terms of raw performance versus the 4080 that it replaced, or the 4080 Super. Those two cards were also very similar. However, I will say that the card obviously comes with the latest technology, so DLSS transformer, great, multi-frame generation, can certainly be very useful. But the thing for me that actually made this a little bit more useful than I first thought was the fact that there is so much overclocking potential, at least in the 5080s I've tested. That means if you are willing to manually overclock, you can actually get a lot more performance out of this, which obviously increases the gap. Now, me being a bit of a pessimist, I think this is probably because they're going to release a 5080 Super with more VRAM, and they'll be able to overclock it and be like, wow, look how much more performance it is, when it's actually just for all intents and purposes an overclocked 5080. If you're going to go all out though, and you want the absolute best of the best, then obviously you're looking at the RTX 5090. And there's no doubt about it, this is an absolute tank, a behemoth when it comes to its capabilities, and it really does skew all of the charts that we've been showing because it's just so far out and ahead of everything else. And unlike the 5080 that only comes with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which is another reason to buy the 5070 Ti because it's got the same memory configuration, if you go for the 5090 you get a whopping 32 gigabytes. That is insane. Now for gaming you're almost certainly not going to need that throughout the lifetime of the card, but if you are a creative professional and obviously you use a lot of VRAM, then actually that is going to be very, very useful because it's going to allow you to do things you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, or it will speed up your processes significantly. So it's good to know that if you want the best level of performance, there is something out there that is so far and beyond everything else. But the price is just ludicrous, isn't it? In the UK, at the time of filming, it's $1,850 or so, so just under £1,900. But in the States, it's a lot more really than that. The availability is not great. Pricing on graphics cards in the States just isn't fantastic at the moment. And it means that if you did want to go for a 5090, you're having to, well, I don't want to say quite literally give an arm and a leg, but it certainly feels like that. It's a lot of money. And you have to ask yourself, how much do I really care about sky-high frame rates with ray tracing and path tracing enabled? Because the latest path tracing, you know, it looks great, but it is just a setting in your game, right? You're still fundamentally playing your games, unless you're like making money out of the graphics card. Personally speaking, I think most people would be better off with like something lower. So like even if you went for a 5080, that's still obviously much better value than a 5090, but ultimately it is down to you. If you want to go for the best of the best, the 5090 has no competition. It is a fantastic graphics card. You just will need to make sure that obviously you have a great power supply in order to get there as well. But this has been, I think, everything that you need to know about graphics cards. I hope it has been really useful. If you want to check out current pricing, as I say, you can find everything linked down below with our affiliate links. But if this video has been helpful, please smash that like button, do it now, and obviously get subscribed. Also, do that now. Why are you not subscribed? And you see loads more videos like this straight to your inbox. But thank you guys so much for watching. We will catch you in the next one.